What's going on, everyone? We're back with top 4 of the League Cup here at the Collector Store in St. Peters, Missouri. We've got an excellent matchup to start off with. Both players here are 3-1. I did not realize last round that Jeremy was coming in at a loss. But we've got 2 players at 3-1 here. Both players who have been featured today on stream already. Chris versus Jeremy. So it's looking to be a pretty good one. Both players, I'd say, are I don't know if it favors one player over the other. Chris's team is a hard Trick Room team. So getting Trick Room up is Chris's priority. Jeremy's team benefits quite a bit from Trick Room. All of Gastrodon, Amoonguss, and Calyrex are very slow. So it's going to really depend on which player can best use their Trick Room turns effectively, I think. I think it's going to come down to that Torkoal. And I do see Chris considering bringing that Torkoal in the back. The Torkoal looks really strong here. Torkoal can pressure eruption damage on many of Jeremy's Pokemon. Although almost all the Pokemon that are weak to fire can Terrasilize to a resistance to it. Nevertheless, you can only do that on one Pokemon. And for example, a combination of Torkoal plus Ursaluna should be able to do things like, for example, Eruption plus Facade or Eruption plus Headlong Rush to KO a lot of different Pokemon on Jeremy's team. So we'll have to see how this one shakes out. Let's get into it. Game 1. Rillaboom and Gholdengo actually starting off from Jeremy's side, whereas we've got the Indeedee and Lunala on the side of Chris. So Rillaboom's grassy terrain is set up first. This Rillaboom is holding the Life Orb item, so no big surprise there that it's moving first. Rillaboom hates this position. It wants to get out of here as soon as possible. Rillaboom would love to be able to use its grassy terrain defensively to prevent these expanding forces from being increased in power and having that spread move effect. But it's not going to do that right now while on the field. Potentially, you could just go for an attack with Rillaboom. Like, for example, a Shadow Ball and Wood Hammer would knock out the Lunala, but that's an easy follow me from Indeedee to cover that play. So it's not obvious, I think, what we should be, or excuse me, it's not obvious to me what Jeremy should be doing here. Jeremy also might not be so mad about Trick Room going up. Potentially, if this is Amoonguss coming in, Amoonguss could spore things. Nope, this looks like just Incineroar. Incineroar will not take any damage from the Lunala's Expanding Force attack, and it'll also take very low damage from Moongeist Beam and Meteor Beam. Well, not Meteor Beam, but I don't think Meteor Beam would be thrown that way. Likely just a follow me Trick Room. We do just see a Make It Rain from Gholdengo to start things off with, though, dealing heavy damage to the Indeedee and breaking the Shadow Shield on the Lunala. Lunala looks like did go for that Expanding Force, so no Trick Room, and that's actually going to be a pretty bad turn for Chris there, if I had to say. So the Gholdengo now can just use Make It Rain again. That should pick up the remaining bit of HP on Indeedee. Indeedee cannot Terrasilize to get out of that attack. The Incineroar can then follow up into the Lunala with a knockoff. It does have knockoff, right? Yeah, it does have knockoff. Now you might think, oh, well, just Terrasilize the Lunala to Fairy. Well, doing that would mean that Make It Rain would deal enough damage. So that's kind of tricky. You don't really want to put all your eggs in that basket necessarily. So potentially you could see the Lunala just going for a Meteor Beam into the Incineroar. Ultimately, I think Jeremy's going to get out of this turn denying Trick Room. I think it's very unlikely that there's a situation where you can get Trick Room up here. Potentially, maybe like there's like a Wide Guard and knockoff. Like maybe Wide Guard blocks to Make It Rain or something like that. But there is no Wide Guard in this Lunala, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Instead, we just see a Helping Hand from Indeedee. A parting gift to this Lunala as it takes more damage from Make It Rain, but is not KO'd. The Indeedee does fall, and now this Lunala is likely going to deal a ton of damage. This Incineroar will go down for sure to a Helping Hand Meteor Beam. There's no way it'll survive this attack. A Meteor Beam would ordinarily be enough to knock out Incineroar, unless it was heavily specially defensive. And I'd say most Incineroar are physically defensive in this metagame, but with a Helping Hand, it's going down for sure. That's a 1-hit KO. Incineroar is gone. The downside of this, though, is that Chris has taken 2 hits on Lunala. Those Make It Rains came at a cost. It looks like there is another Trick Room setter in the back, though. So I'd imagine we could see here Rillaboom coming in. Rillaboom would be in a great spot here for Jeremy. You could use Rillaboom to deal heavy damage with Wood Hammer into something. Gallade comes out, and also, importantly, so the Indeedee switched in there before the Incineroar, so the Indeedee is faster than Incineroar. That could come up potentially later. Excuse me, the Indeedee replacement switched in before the Incineroar replacement, meaning that Indeedee is faster than Incineroar naturally. Not usually that surprising, but Indeedee is probably like min speed, so Incineroar might also be slow as well. I don't know if the players will catch on to that or not, but the tricky thing here is that Woodhammer is likely going to pressure a knockout onto the Gallade. Does Gallade have it does have Terra Grass, so it can use that to get around it. I imagine Gallade probably can get up Trick Room here. Both Gallade having Wide Guard also means that it could block the Make It Rain from Gholdengo, so you see Gholdengo retreating. We'll see the last Pokemon here for Jeremy, likely that Calyrex-Ice Rider. No Calyrex-Ice Rider. Instead, Gastrodon is the final Pokemon. We see Gallade switching out, thinking I'm not going to mess with terrestrializing this Pokemon. Instead, goes into Torkoal. Torkoal's in a decent spot here if Lunala can get Trick Room up, but we'll have to see. There is a terrestrialization. This should be onto the Rillaboom, right? Yep, there's the Rillaboom. Rillaboom will now have increased damage to its grass-type attacks. Woodhammer here is going to hurt. Anything that takes this attack is going to be taking heavy damage. Even the Torkoal. Actually, is just a Grassy Glide, though, so not going to take the extra recoil from Woodhammer, and instead gets the knockout on Lunala. The Gallade could have set Trick Room up here for this Torkoal, but nope, doesn't happen. Gets a turn right, and Rillaboom... that's probably the best case scenario there. Knocking out the Lunala doesn't even risk being slower, and Woodhammer even dealing more recoil damage. Grassy Glide just probably the best possible turn there for Jeremy. So now this Gallade probably can set up Trick Room if it terrestrializes and goes for like a Woodhammer and an Ice Beam from the Gastrodon will probably not... I don't know. I think it probably will actually knock it out. I mean, this is Terra Grass, Life Orb boosted, Grassy Terrain boosted Woodhammer, so that's going to deal a lot of damage. This Gallade can't protect. I imagine you want to double target the Gallade, and then if you lose your Pokemon here with your Jeremy, I don't even think it's that bad. Like, if both Pokemon go down, as long as you dealt any damage to the Torkoal, then I think you can win the 1v1 with Gholdengo. Gholdengo does not have Power Gem. Its strongest attack into the Torkoal would be that Shadow Ball, but yeah, let's see what happens. Torkoal does go for the Protect, so it's not going to get a punish here. Really banking on this Trick Room going up. It is the Woodhammer, though, and that's into the Gallade. Let's see how much damage this does. Oh, a disconnect. No! Oh, man. That's a really unfortunate turn of events. It does... hit into the Gallade, but yeah, we don't get to see... What does the Gastrodon go for? Probably not going to know. I bet the connection's going to end before we actually see the turn play out. Yeah, Earth Power into the Torkoal. Oh, so actually, we see that Chris got the turn right. He did get Trick Room up. It would have been in KO range of Grassy Glide next turn, and then the Gastrodon can go for Earth Power. So I imagine it would have been a win for Jeremy, but... that's a disconnect at 3-2, and usually the way that those disconnects are ruled is at 3-2, I believe that's not a replay game. I believe that's a tie. These players are now operating with a tie in their game. The impact of this is that if both players now each win a game, it will go to sudden death. So we'll have to see if that is what transpires here. But until we see how these next couple of games play out, we won't know what the impact of it is yet. So, back to the adjustments that both players can make, though. The Torkoal and... the Torkoal, I think, is the most important Pokemon on Chris's team. We saw that Torkoal had to come in there in the late game, and it was pressuring some offensive damage with Eruption, but couldn't end up doing it. One really interesting thing is that Jeremy opted not to bring Calyrex-Ice. That was a decision I wasn't expecting, but I guess it makes sense. Calyrex only really wants to come versus, like, I don't even really know. I mean, like, kind of against Torkoal if it terrestrializes, so it's kind of Terra hungry. That Rillaboom from Jeremy was actually pretty threatening overall, like, all things considered. When it came back in after, Grassy Terrain was set up, like, it was able to do huge damage. Like, it knocked out the Lunala from the HP it was at, and then nearly threatened to 1-hit KO on the Gallade. So, I really like that Rillaboom there. We'll have to see how Jeremy decides to adjust overall. Looks like the same things in the lead, both Rillaboom and Gholdengo for Jeremy, as opposed to the Lunala and Indeedee for Chris. So, just like in Game 1, the Psychic Terrain will be the terrain that ends up on the field in the end, Indeedee being slower than the Rillaboom here. The Rillaboom, just like in Game 1, probably wants to get off the field. However, we did see in Game 1 that Chris ended up playing pretty aggressively with the turn, going for I believe it was it Expanding Force and, I think it was Helping Hand Expanding Force, if I recall correctly. In any case, it came in on the Incineroar, so it ended up getting very low value out of that. You can punish that play with a Meteor Beam, but it's kind of a risky move. I don't really know if you want to commit fully to that. Looks like there's just going to be a Follow Me from the Indeedee. And Rillaboom did not switch out this time, so Rillaboom is going to probably deal a lot of damage here with Wood Hammer. Mega Rain does a good chunk into the Indeedee. Rillaboom should be able to finish this off with a Wood Hammer, but actually we see the speed interaction between Lunala and Rillaboom. The Lunala is faster than the Rillaboom, slower than the Gholdengo. Going for Moongeist Beam into the Gholdengo means that it's fainted. The Wood Hammer will pick up the Indeedee and finish off its remaining HP. As opposed to how this situation was in Game 1, I think the big difference is the Rillaboom here is not really great on the board. It also just took all of that chip damage from both the Rocky Helmet, the Life Orb, and the Wood Hammer recoil. So now, Gallade coming in is fairly safe. You should be able to get a Trick Room, I think, against, like, everything. Incineroar can't really do it. Well, I guess Incineroar could do it if you're willing to commit to the Terrestrialization on Incineroar. You can get around a Meteor Beam that way and then double into the Gallade. But also the Lunala outspeeds the Rillaboom. I mean, it might just be able to pick up a knockout with Expanding Force or Moongeist Beam. Meteor Beam would also do heavy damage into the Rillaboom too, so this is a really tricky spot for Jeremy. I don't know what Pokemon that you could bring in here that would significantly change the matchup either. Like, Calyrex-Ice is not great here because of the Meteor Beam weakness in both in and out Terrestrialization. So it looks like it's just Incineroar. The Gallade that's been replaced for the fallen Indeedee will not have its attack drop thanks to its Clear Amulet item. So now you're in a tricky spot. Like, do you want to commit to your Terra Ghost on your Incineroar? If you do that, then maybe you can get a knockout into the Gallade. You could double into it with a Wood Hammer and Flare Blitz combination attack. But maybe the Lunala just attacks here. I mean, the Gallade's not going to Wide Guard on Pokemon without spread moves, right? So I think there should be a Trick Room going up somewhere. It's just a question of where. And can the Lunala make this play guaranteed? I think the answer is yes. I think you can pressure enough damage into the Rillaboom here to get Trick Room up safely. And then I imagine you'll probably win with Torkoal in the back. It looks like Chris considering potentially going for Sacred Sword into the Incineroar. That would not cover a Terrestrialization, but it would potentially deal heavy damage to the Incineroar if it does not Terrestrialize. We do see a Terrestrialization, though. This Terrestrialization going into the Incineroar, not going to take any damage from the Sacred Sword, but if Expanding Force was the move used by Lunala, it's going to deal heavy damage to Incineroar. Incineroar just kind of had to do that to get around the potential Meteor Beam. But yeah, it's going to eat a huge Expanding Force in exchange for that, and a critical hit on top of it. Oh, this Incineroar doesn't like to hear that. The Gallade, it will probably be second to move. Yeah, we did see that the Incineroar was slower than the Indeedee, also confirmed to be slower than the Gallade. Just goes for knockoff into the Gallade. Does some good damage, but whatever Pokemon comes in here now has to outspeed Lunala, or Lunala can just pick up a knockout onto the Incineroar and just finish things off. But that's not a Pokemon that outspeeds Lunala. That's a Gastrodon. So Expanding Force here will easily be able to pick up the remaining HP on Incineroar, and then Psycho Cut should pick up the rest of the damage on Gastrodon. I don't think there's any way that Jeremy can come back from this one. We will be going into Game 3, but yeah, it looks like Jeremy just throws in the towel, says, you got me on this one. Your pressure outside of Trick Room was actually the big deal breaker there. And it's kind of hard to see what Jeremy's going to do that's like significantly different. One of the awkward things about Jeremy's team is that, like, as a balanced Trick Room team, his opponent, Chris, has a really offensive Trick Room team with, like, big threats that operate in and out of Trick Room. Like, Torkoal is really, really bad in Trick Room for Jeremy. But Lunala is really, really bad for Jeremy out of Trick Room, too. I think you've got to not lead that Rillaboom. That Rillaboom's got to go. You've got to lead something else instead. The Rillaboom as the lead, I think, is not very effective. KOing the Indeedee and then picking up, then going into Rillaboom and then using those Terra Grass Grassy Glides would be, I think, a more effective strategy. Chris here, I think, very confidently locking in these 3 Psychic types. I think they're all very good in the matchup. And then, yeah, Torkoal's no surprise to me. Torkoal, if it gets going in Trick Room, is just going to deal so much damage. It does have a poor matchup into the Gastrodon, and not a fantastic matchup into Incineroar, but, like, Sun-boosted Eruptions are always going to be strong. It also does notably have 3 Fire-type attacks. It knows Eruption, Heat Wave, and Weather Ball. So it doesn't have any way to hit these Pokemon outside of the resisted damage. It doesn't have Earth Power or Body Press for Incineroar, for example. So Jeremy here has to figure out, like, how do I deal with this oppressive Lunala in the early game while not just letting Trick Room go up so the Torkoal sweeps me in the late game. Normally the way that you'd approach this, like, this sort of, like, heavy outcome, like, high octane damage is you'd want to use your speed control to make your Pokemon faster. But in this case, Chris is kind of outspeeding him in both in and out of Trick Room. The Lunala is faster out of Trick Room. The Torkoal is faster in Trick Room. So Jeremy is affected by what's sometimes called a speed sandwich. Sandwiched in between these 2 powerful Pokemon spread moves, is not able to use speed control to get around that, and so has to just take these attacks. It looks like we've got Gholdengo and Incineroar leading off this time, so no Rillaboom in the lead. I like seeing that. The Incineroar still is in a tricky spot, though. Incineroar could Terastallize to Terra Ghost to be able to survive this Meteor Beam. We don't really like doing that. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that play. Chris can just not use Meteor Beam. Chris can use Moongeist Beam into the Gholdengo. You can just predict the Incineroar's Terastallization and go for a Moongeist Beam into that. Probably not that very likely for that one, but Chris here has a Trick Room if he wants it. Gholdengo can use Trick to get rid of the choice specs that it holds, but it kind of wants them. Like, it likes doing that extra damage from Make It Rain. So, like, Jeremy has to predict, does Chris want to go for just an attack here on this turn, or does he want to go for the Trick Room? And we'll find out here with the Follow Me from Indeedee protecting Lunala from any attack that's aimed its way. Won't protect it from the Make It Rain, but thanks to that Shadow Shield on Lunala, it will take significantly less damage from it. It is just a Moongeist Beam in response, though, so no Meteor Beam. Jeremy gets that turn right. Gholdengo does go down, but the Incineroar surviving the turn means that it should get something valuable off. I would imagine here, yeah, just a knockoff. That will deal the last bit of HP to the Indeedee and weaken it significantly. Now I imagine you could go into your Rillaboom. Rillaboom would be pretty threatening here. You should be able to get a knockout into the Lunala if you want. You can go for a Terra Grass Woodhammer. You should get the KO. The question is, can you stop the Gallade from setting Trick Room? I think the answer is probably not. So it'd be a matter of, do you think, like, for example, if you use Flare Blitz into the Gallade, maybe your Gastrodon can win the 1v1 in the endgame versus Torkoal and Gallade. I'm not exactly sure. Jeremy would know better than me. And actually, it's not Gallade coming out. It's actually the Torkoal, followed up by the Calyrex-Ice Rider from Jeremy. Okay, so this Calyrex-Ice Rider is threatening some damage with high horsepower into the Torkoal, and a little bit of damage with Glacial Lance onto both targets, but it doesn't really like being here. The Meteor Beam is surely coming out from the Lunala. It will mean that the Trick Room's not going up. Doing this play does guarantee that Trick Room is not going up for Jeremy. I think that's pretty certain. The question is, like, what do you do about it? Like, I guess one thing you could do is potentially Terastallize your Calyrex. Maybe you'll still take a Meteor Beam. But if you do that, then you can go for a Glacial Lance and knockoff into the Lunala. That will probably do enough to pick up a KO. And then maybe you can count on your Gastrodon winning in the end game. That is important, though. There's only one of Rillaboom or Gastrodon in the back here. And we're going to find out. It is that Gastrodon. So there is no turning off Psychic Terrain here. Oh, this Calyrex is going to Terastallize as well. So it's going to have to hope that it doesn't take this Meteor Beam, because Meteor Beam does a lot of damage to Calyrex. I do think it will survive. I would be shocked if it just dropped. But it also means that this Glacial Lance is not going to do enough in return. Like, Glacial Lance will definitely not knock out Lunala. So, yeah. Jeremy really, really needs this Meteor Beam to go into Gastrodon. But even if it does, Meteor Beam and Eruption is going to do so much damage into this Gastrodon. We'll have to see, though. Meteor Beam does come out, and it looks like it is into that Calyrex. The Terastallization not helping it, but it does survive at very low HP. Opting for the Glacial Lance, that's going to do a good chunk into the Lunala. Not a knockout, but will do some damage. And the Torkoal is only follow up with Heat Wave. So not as much damage into the Gastrodon as could have been. Using this play, again, by doing this set of actions, Jeremy guarantees that no Trick Room is going up with this combination of attacks. Now you can go into your Incineroar, and the advantage of doing it in this way is that the Meteor Beam Power Herb combination has been spent. If Chris wants to go for that Meteor Beam again, it would require a charging turn, and that's far too slow when the Incineroar is staring you down. I imagine this is something like a Flare Blitz into the Lunala, and then I'm not sure if Gastrodon will Earth Power, Yawn, or Protect. It probably doesn't want to take all this damage from either Expanding Force or Moongeist Beam. Torkoal's has a very low punish, but we have another disconnect. So that's very unfortunate. That was also 3 and 2. So that should be ruled as another tie. So in single elimination rounds, if you have a tie, a win, and a tie, I believe it should be a win for the player who had the 1 victory.